There's strong interest in investing in the cannabis industry. Any doubt about that? Just talk to Steve Gormley, CEO of the new cannabis private equity fund, Seventh Point. Good to see you here, Steve.
Thanks, Rhonda. Thanks for having me.
And you had recently an initial round of funding for your fund. It was oversubscribed. So why is this market looking increasingly attractive to investors?
It's because of the dramatic shift in social attitudes that has essentially prompted the change in the regulatory market. In December 2014, President Obama signed into effect the Rohrabacher-Farr bill, which essentially stripped out federal funding for the criminal prosecution of legal marijuana businesses in states where the voters had spoken. And in May of 2015, that law was extended, and it received as many, if not more, Republican votes than it did Democratic. It passed by a margin of 81%. And in the year that's gone by, the number of raids and the amount of intervention by the federal government has dropped significantly. And the conversation coming into this election cycle around marijuana and the fact that we have a libertarian candidate who left his post as CEO of a marijuana company to run for president has simply changed the shape of attitudes and investment in the community.
So you are looking at investments in the LA area in particular. Why is that kind of the medical marijuana mecca that looks like a good investment for you?
I think LA is to the marijuana industry what Silicon Valley is to technology or New York is to fashion and finance. Half of all revenues generated out of the 25 states that have marijuana laws on the books are derived out of California, and half of that is lodged in the LA basin. The most talented botanists and geneticists, the most successful retail operators, all hail from the Los Angeles market.
And you had mentioned to me, you're in this to make money. I mean, this isn't just, some passing fancy while you do some other job. How much money is there to be made, and what do you look at as a company that might actually give you the return on investment that you're seeking?
Well, industry insiders believe that by 2020, the legal market will be worth $40 to $45 billion. The reason we believe that it's the perfect time to get in, I liken it to what Joe Kennedy did in advance of alcohol prohibition being repealed. They got in, they laid the groundwork, they operated in states where voters had spoken, where the laws had loosened, and they laid the groundwork for a national footprint in advance of the repeal of alcohol prohibition. The same opportunity exists today, almost 100 years later, and it's effectuating in the same trajectory. And social attitudes have changed tremendously.
Any concern that might change depending on who wins the presidential election and how Congress fares?
The biggest opponent to the movement was Chris Christie, and he's not in the race any longer. Though if Donald Trump were to get into office, there's a concern that Christie would be his attorney general and would then push against the industry. I don't see that as the case. I think firstly, Trump has very difficult math to overcome, and most of us on the inside don't believe he'll actually be president. And even if he were, he's had some pretty progressive statements to say. He's not against medical marijuana. He's made it clear that the states should be laboratories for the development of this industry. And Hillary Clinton is much further to the left than he is on this, though she's not nearly as far to the left as Gary Johnson.
You mentioned something interesting to me, and that is within the investing community, there's a lot of diversity right now, perhaps not in terms of women, but what will get investing in this industry more mainstream in your view?
I think when the drug is rescheduled, particularly to Schedule III, the banks and institutional investors and lenders will come off the sidelines because they'll be able to. Right now, being a Schedule I narcotic, you can't, which is ludicrous from our perspective. The federal government prohibits that, obviously. Banks will not come off the sidelines. I think when the drug is rescheduled, and also I think a tipping point will come during this election cycle when Californians go to the polls and vote in the recreational referendum, which is polling at nearly 70%. So we believe strongly that This election cycle will be a tipping point, and when the drug is rescheduled, which we anticipate will likely occur through executive order or legislation in the first 200 days of the next administration.
Politics aside, what's the biggest hurdle you have to making money? What's the other potential roadblock that you have to think about for your investors?
The biggest issue is the regulatory issue, and it actually it actually doesn't impede being able to make money. I mean, if we had a banking infrastructure where we could use more conventional means to dividend investors, that would be really helpful. But the credit unions have stepped in where the banks remain too scared and on the sidelines. It's a growing business. I mean, it's a tremendous market as it is. And the black market, we don't even know the value of it. But you know, when you look at the statistics of the number of Americans who have used marijuana, who use it recreationally or use it medically, the data's outstanding. And like marriage equality, this is on a trajectory. Marriage equality started with a change in social attitudes and then a state-by-state shift in regulatory framework, and the same is true here.
Well, Steve Gormley, we're going to watch your progress. Thanks for sharing what you're up to with us. Appreciate it.
Rhonda, thanks for having me in.
I'm Rhonda Schaffler for The Street.